Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Crop. I'm Anna Heslop and today I'm having a very timely discussion with Peter Carey from Lincoln Agritech about the hows and whys of planting catch crops after winter grazing. So, Peter, I guess the first thing we really need to determine is what is a catch crop and what benefits can they offer?
Yeah, well, a catch crop is usually a crop that's planted at the end of a growing season and is with an idea of capturing nutrients that have been left behind from the previous crop. In our case, we're doing a little bit differently. We're talking about using a crop or catch crop to capture nitrogen left over from the grazing animal. So we have a fodder crop like kale or fodder beet, and we're trying to capture some of that nitrogen that's been left behind by the grazing animal, because otherwise the soil is sitting bare over the winter and spring period where we've got our greatest potential for drainage and nitrogen loss. And so that catch crop is there to try and capture some of that nitrogen. This differs a little bit from what we used to call a cover crop, where these were usually planted at the end of an arable season where you plant a cover crop, and therefore you could capture those nutrients that you may have otherwise lost in the leaching season, then turn that crop back into the soil or possibly as like a green manure or something like that.
Yeah, so they're two quite separate things.
They are different, yeah. Or different purposes, yeah.
Different. Yeah, they may be the same crop.
They could be, yes.
Yeah.
They could be.
So what is an ideal catch crop? Is there specific ones that suit best in particular areas?
Yes, there are. We've worked mainly with forage oats. We generally find that this is a good combination of a winter active crop, but also a crop that produces good quality feed. It's kind of looking for that optimum. There are some faster growing ones, potential catch crops like rye corn that you could use, but generally they have a shorter window. They grow quite rapidly, but the quality is not as good as, say, from forage oats. So we generally try and looking at, in our work that we've worked in, we're usually looking at a green chop silage or something similar, which is taken in November, early December. So there's time to plant the next or potentially bring in another year of winter forage, or you may be returning back into pasture again in a renewal phase or restorative phase.
So you just touched on that importance of something that's going to germinate, take off and start growing in the coldest months of the year.
That's right, and oats is quite tolerant. It's a robust crop. You don't have to mollycoddle it too much, and we find that it even though it looks like it's not doing very much in the first few months after drilling, the root system's often expanding, picking up some of that nitrogen, storing some of that nitrogen, and generally we find that the crop itself, even though it may not be very large, it has a very high N content. So it's working away there, and then it's just waiting for that bit of spring warmth to really take off. And usually it's a good time, because we often find that the nitrogen that sits in the soil is there in a what we call the ammonium form, which is held to the soil. But once the soil starts to warm, we undergo a process of nitrification, and that ammonium becomes nitrate. And of course, nitrate is what everybody's talking about, is a lot more mobile, but it often can coincide at a time when the crop is just ready to start taking that up in a larger amount, to kind of stimulate the growth over the spring period.
Okay, so we're just coming out of what's been a particularly wet period across much of New Zealand, and particularly in the areas where winter grazing is common. How long, what's the window for getting these crops in?
Well, generally speaking, the winter forage season is usually from about June to the end of July, about 2 months. So we are saying get or drill that catch crop as soon as practicable. So even if half the paddock has been grazed and there's another half to go, why not get in and try and drill that crop that catch crop as soon as you're able to. Uh, in Canterbury, we've done 3 seasons, and we have not had a wet winter where we haven't been able to put in a catch crop. In fact, some of the conditions have been, very spring-like. But we accept that there's always going to be the odd year, or maybe 1 year in 5, where conditions can be very wet and you're just going to have to wait. But I think even now, there would be conditions have dried out a wee bit. If you've got a paddock that's been grazed and now is a good time to drill. And direct drill is usually our preference if you can. Depends on the soil surface. You're trying to you still want a good soil seed contact. So, but we do generally recommend to minimise tillage over this period, just in case that you end up stimulating further mineralisation of the soil organic matter and producing more nitrogen than you've already got already. But by and large, we find that you can get away with direct drilling usually after a kale or crop, but fodder beet presents a bit more of an issue because you've got high yielding crop. The bulb itself creates indentation in the soil, and then you've got cows treading all over it. So we accept that you're going to have to probably do a little bit of seed bed preparation, but it doesn't have to be too much. We usually would say minimum till, and then look to drill as soon as you can.
So what sorts of sowing rates are you using? Are they high, low, medium?
Yeah, look, if it's oats only, then we're talking about 110 kilograms of oats per hectare, and that's really to try and get around 300 plants per square metre. So it's the emergence rate we're target population, because we're trying to get fast canopy closure here. We want to get that canopy closure as quickly as we can. And so we're usually recommending high rates, and maybe if you were looking to do a spring, a later spring sowing, and this will generally gives us also maximum yield as well. The intention really also is that by getting rapid canopy closure, you're also protecting the soil from rain and water erosion and runoff as well. So there's a twofold thing here going on. In fact, there already is twofold things going on here, because, okay, we know that the oats is going to take up nitrogen, but what it's also doing is taking up water. And so it's taking water out of the profile, and that in itself slows drainage or reduces drainage, because nitrate leaching is the result of two things. It's the nitrogen, the mineral nitrogen sitting in the soil, but it's also drainage. And if you can stop either one, then you're reducing that nitrogen loss. So if you've got no drainage, then you really haven't lost any nitrate out of the soil.
So then you've got a crop that you can green chop month or so before Christmas and be ready for whatever comes in, even a late crop of peas or beans or something.
Yes,
like
that's
that.
right. I mean, depending on what your rotation is, and it can vary between farms and that. But generally speaking, you would probably not have a paddock and winter forage for more than a couple of years, because it's fairly detrimental to the soil physical condition after that time. And so you're looking probably to get back into some type of restorative phase after those 2 years. But we've been sowing our crops generally from anything from the beginning of July to August, right through to August, and we're getting yields by the time we're cutting in, kind of mid to late November, early December. So if we're over, maybe a 4-week period, but typically we're getting 8 tons of dry matter per hectare, anything up to 12. So 12 was our best, and it depends a little bit on what the paddocks come out of. The 12 tons was a paddock that had been into long-term pasture. It had only been 1 year. It was first year it'd been a winter crop, and I'd always like to point out that because it's coming out of long-term pasture, there's an awful lot of nitrogen stored up in the soil organic matter, and it doesn't all just release in 1 year. So I'm sure you had a good kale crop, but there was still a lot of nitrogen in that soil ready to come out of that soil organic matter. So if you hadn't had a catch crop there, I'd hate to think how much nitrogen would be potentially lost, just simply because there's nothing there to take that nitrogen up.
That was quite a high risk.
So it was quite a high risk situation if you don't have, and we found in our fallow plots about 200 kilograms of nitrogen sitting there at the end of the season. So it is quite a that's the potential amount you could. Well, I'm not saying you would lose it all in 1 year or 1 season, but that's the risk. Yeah.
So on the flip side, is there enough in those soils post-winter grazing for that oats crop? There's definitely enough there?
Well, it depends. Again, it depends on how big was the winter forage crop that you're grazing. So if it was a light 7-ton cow crop, then it's every chance that you will have to monitor that crop to make sure that you get the quantity and quality target you want. So we did find in some situations where there was light crop there, we applied some nitrogen at the end of October. So once we're out of the main drainage period, so end of October, early November, to get that crop through to the maximum quality and quantity. But generally speaking, if you've got a winter forage crop of 14 tons of kale or maybe 25 or more of fodder beet, often there can be enough nitrogen in that soil to get that crop through to maturity. So it's just a matter that you must monitor the crop and keep an eye on it. So once you start seeing the first signs of nitrogen deficiency, we can start to see it yellowing up. And because that'll bring on the reproductive phase that you don't want at that too early, So we want it to mature at the right time and get that maximum quantity. So from that point of view, monitoring the crop is important. But generally, we're not talking large amounts here. We may be just 80 units of urea or something like that. Yeah, just to get it through to that end. Yeah.
So what else is important for those catch crops following winter grazing?
Well, as I said, we're talking about harvesting before. We're aiming for a growth stage of about 45 to 52. So this is what we call the booting stage. So it's just before the puricle comes out or as it comes out. So that's where we're aiming for to get the maximum quality. The other thing that's important too is weed suppression. So that's the other reason why we go for these higher population target rates, so that we have good coverage and we don't have too many issues with weeds. So, we don't want to be doing too much spraying if we can help it. So if we can get a good strike of oats, then that's good around that 300 plants per square metre, then we know that we can get good canopy closure and weeds shouldn't be too much of a problem.
Well, thank you very much. Now, is there anywhere, we've had a good summary in sort of 10 minutes here, where else can people go to get some information?
Well, look, there is quite a few so the websites through Dairy NZ and through FAR and etc., where we'll have an updated, brand new reformatted, professionally formatted guidelines for people to download. So that'll be up very shortly. I think there may be an earlier one there already, but we've just completed this 3-year project and we're going to update that very shortly with a new guideline. So that should give you plenty of useful information and some of the research or backing for why we've run this project. I should point out that this is what the work I've been doing has been part of a Sustainable Farming Fund project, largely sponsored by MPI, but also they've been co-funding by Agricom and Blue CDC's Raymond's Down and Balance, so and Beef and Lamb New Zealand. So there's been quite a consortium of people who've put this together to try and help farmers with some of these issues around winter forage grazing. So we know that a lot of this work that we've been doing has been very practically based. So we've taken it out to commercial farms in order to show that it is a practical thing to do in a rotation. And so we've taken that earlier research. And so we know that in theory that these things work, but we had to obviously show to farmers that they could have confidence to go out and put a winter forage crop, a catch crop into the winter forage rotation and know that there was a reasonable chance of success. Now, what I've talked about here largely with direct drilling and minimum till, generally speaking in Canterbury, that hasn't been too much of a problem, but we have also worked in Southland, and certainly winter soil conditions in Southland are more problematic than they are in Canterbury. So one of the things that we did use in Southland was that we were involved with using or trialling a Farm A Spader drill owned by John Van Vliet a farmer down in Southland who comes from the Netherlands and has seen one over in the Netherlands working, decided that he thought this could work here, and he brought it back to New Zealand, and it was very helpful, or very useful in terms of putting crops into wet soils. It is quite amazing to watch it go through a wet soil, and it basically brings up drier soil and drills in one pass. So it was basically essential for the work that we did in Southland. And so we accept that, Southland is not like Canterbury, and there are different sets of conditions, and probably South Otago is a bit similar. So there is other work that we would like to carry on or be able to do down in Southland in terms of more work maybe with the Spader drill, but also we know that the Spader drill is not a silver bullet. It's not going to work in very stony soils. It's not going to work in very heavy soils or very wet soils. So the intention was to look at some techniques that could be like a light establishment technique. So things around broadcasting, potentially, even some people suggesting helicoptering seed on. But, we wondered, well, could we do it on the back of an ATV with just putting out seed behind every break, as the farmer's moving down the paddock, with the mob or the herd. And, so there were lots of things that we potentially could try, and maybe that will form the basis of other work. But certainly for the work that we did in Southland, a Spader drill was a great piece of equipment. It has limitations, but certainly meant that we could get we could drill a catch crop in in July, where most people just wouldn't be able to get on the ground.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Peter, and thank you, listeners. Keep warm and have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.